bad. Sorry for that. I didn't turn my mic off. Good morning, everyone. I'd like to meeting open. Particularly 30. Thank you, Greg and Jordan. Start again. 9:31. We'll declare the meeting open. Who'd like to start with the Karakia group?
Morena Tato. Good morning, committee members. Good to see you all, and acknowledge staff here today to help with what's quite a different agenda, I suppose, for ICMC, in that we have a number of bespoke papers for you today. I'll start off with our karakia. Whakataka te hau ki te uru, whakataka te hau ki te tonga, kia mā kinakina ke uta, kia mā taratara ke tai, he hiaki ana te atakura, he tio, he huka, he hauhu, tihei Māori ora.
Thanks, Greg. If it's okay with everyone, we'll take the health and safety as read because we've all been in the chambers before. Apologies, Pamela and Warren. Is there any others? Oh, I guess Drew's here. Okay. Is there any calls for amendments to the agenda? No. So I second a Noel. All in favour? Against? Carried. Move on to the next one. Any disclose of interest need to be brought forward? No. So we can move on with that. Thank you. And we'll get straight into the minutes of the subcommittees.
Take the elevation of myself and Chair Robbie.
Got demoted.
Page 25. Oh, sorry, page 20. Let's get the right page now. Page 17. Members President Noel Smith, Chair Waikato Regional Council. Robbie Cookson, Deputy Chair Waikato Regional Council. Sorry, Bruce.
When did this happen? Where have we all been?
I don't really care if it's changed or not, but somebody might.
Accidentally, Dave did that. So we'll just make aware who made the mistake. So if that can be altered. Yeah, so we need just a first and second for the minutes. Stu, you got a question?
Yeah, please. Just my computer's not warmed up, but I noticed there was 4 recommendations in particular that came out of. No, I wasn't there.
Greg's going to talk to that in a minute.
So we're just accepting them for accuracy, and in terms of what happens with those, I want to just dig into those. But yeah, cool.
Okay, I've just got one. I've only just noted a spelling correction in the report on the natural heritage stuff. Alan Saunders, the name is spelt incorrectly. I'm just fixing that in the minutes. Yep. Yeah.
Really good, very informative, and great.
Want to add exclamation mark? These corrections and the names changed of Noel and not chair and deputy chair of regional.
Oh, sorry, I thought you'd said subcommittee minutes.
No. Yeah.
Sorry, just to clarify, the amendment to the Natural Heritage Partnerships item is relevant to the ICMC minutes, not the subcommittee minute. And then the reference to roles is relevant to the subcommittee minutes.
Happy with that now, Noel? So Noel in a seconder. All in favour? Aye. Against? Carried. So we will have the discussion about. Mover? Oh. Have a mover? And, oh, chat on, or Ben? You happy to? Yep. Yeah, yeah. Do you want to discuss on that?
I want to understand what it's all mean, because I don't quite understand. Some of it doesn't make sense to me. The one about land use policy, well, we've got a RPS, we've got a regional plan that's under review, so I don't understand what you're wanting to achieve with that one. And the mission statement, we've got a strategic direction and all that sort of stuff, which seems a bit inconsistent with that as well. So just, I mean, this has got to go to council,
Yeah.
and for me to support that, I've got to understand what we're supporting and why. Yeah.
You want to speak on that? Or because that your committee meeting? And I.
Yeah, so if I kick things off, so the first recommendation I've got on the screen there is around the involvement of landowners in the For Pete's Sake work. This was something that was discussed during the long-term plan. It was a business case for the continuation of that work, and I do recall there was a discussion around ensuring that there is engagement with landowners as part of that project. And so my expectation is that would be already occurring, but what I think would be the best way to treat this is to this committee to receive the recommendation, but for an action to be taken for the project to be informed about this request. I'm interested in whether or not there are any specific landowner stakeholders that are referenced as wanting to be involved in this, or if it's more of a general comment. But I can take that as an action from the meeting today to follow up with the For Pete's Sake project and the relevant director.
That all makes sense to me, as long as it's reasonable, that their expectations aren't unreasonable, proportional to all the other everyone else that's involved, and proportional to their impact. It's
There's a feeling that peat is still shrinking, and in some cases, you've got peat in the Lower Waikato area, which it might be 20 centimetres peat, and it's not in its raw state anymore. It's and there's probably no more shrinkage and the likes, but more organic than it is.
No, it's the other way around. It's
Other
more
way.
mineralised than organic.
Yeah. And as a result of that, they just want to make sure that all that is taken into account with any of the recommendations. So they don't want to dominate, they don't want to take it over, they just want to be heard. And once they've been heard, then I think but they were just one of many stakeholders. Of you.
No, it was the same discussion, and it wasn't quite as intense as the Waikato Scheme Committee meeting, but it was spoken about at Hauraki. But one of the committee members had, it is going to affect his land considerably, and he wanted to be able to have a voice and be heard of how it would affect his property. So, and he was quite emotional about that in the meeting. So, what was the person's name? He's an ex Waikato District Councillor. Yeah, it hit him quite emotionally. So it was mainly he wanted. He put his point of view that they needed representation around the Pete's sake work, and that's all he was asking for. So it wasn't himself; he just wanted some landowner catchment representation around that discussion. So yeah. Okay. Oh, have we got a mover? Oh, sorry, Bruce, you got a question?
Yeah, I'm in that dead zone again today.
Sorry.
Yeah, I think it's just around the words that are used. When you use a word like involved, it's not clear what you mean by it. Do you want to engage people? Do you want to seek volunteers for case studies? It's good involved is because the bottom line here is science needs to drive it.
Yeah.
The science and the evidence, and that needs to be independent from influence, if you know what I mean.
So that does that need to be something simpler, more like representation?
Look, I'm okay with it now,
Yeah.
as it is, but
Yeah.
I think that's what's led to this discussion. It's just the way
Yeah, no, that's
the
fair
word
enough.
involved. Yeah.
Dave should have been softening the wording on it on the day then, maybe. Yeah. Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Okay.
They want to have a forum to give their thoughts and let that be considered in the process.
Yeah.
That's all they're really asking.
Yeah. Yeah.
But I think that's the point. That's why the question has been asked.
Can we just put
What
an
does
action behind
word
that?
involved mean?
What that wording actually means?
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. Cool. Thank you. So we can have a mover? Yeah, move. And I suppose I'd have to second it because I'm the only other person that was at the meeting. Yeah. So, sorry about that. Cool. All in favour? Against? Carried. Thank you. Next one.
Yeah, so this particular one, so I think that's basically a request of council. It's beyond the terms of reference of this particular committee, so it's probably appropriate. It's I guess a consideration of this committee whether or not it seeks that recommendation from council on its position as described in this request.
If I may, there was discussion around retreat and all sorts of potential consequences. And so the landowner representatives wanted to see adaptation as the preferred option rather than retreat and retirement and all that sort of stuff. So it's probably a policy issue.
Well, to me, this lies at the heart of the discussion we had less than a week ago about SIDF, and I'm not prepared to support that recommendation going to council because I don't think we have any justification or logic behind doing it. It's as you said, we've got a regional policy statement, we've got a regional plan that's under review, and there's just no evidence to justify us supporting that. So that's where I'm sitting.
If I could make one recommendation, potentially taking off those last 4 or 5 words, 6 words, may. So it's simply a clarification of position as opposed to clarifying a position as being something.
Yeah, I'm more than happy to clarify our position, which probably is been a bit crude here, but it's underpinned by SIDF, really. That was the whole intent of SIDF, so that we could, because the default position for various parts of the catchment are all going to be different. You know, and the landowners have supported that. As I just saw a press release from that thing you guys went to the opening of the other day, Robbie, you know, well, that's completely at odds with adaptation.
So, through you, Mr. Chair, would be stopping at climate change would be the last word. Recommendation is my suggestion, but again, it's up to the committee.
That word default is pretty risky, because the default position is going to be particular to whatever the issue is in each part of the catchment. So I'd actually take the word default out as well.
What's the position then?
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah. You could have position / policy would be even better. But people realise it's, yeah.
The issue in relation to the RPS and all that work that's going on is in Tracy's team, that this probably needs to fit into that work, as you say. There is serious concern, and as you know, we sit at the table and it's the majority, or whether it's a consensus or a vote, but that was the position of the meeting. So we bring it forward, but I think in the big scheme of things, there's a whole lot of work being done that will help clarify this anyway. So position, and I don't have a problem with removing that. For someone else to second it.
Yeah, and look, I'm guessing, I don't know, Greg and co, if you can put together some sort of just 1 or 2 page. I don't think you should go away for hours and hours and hours and just try and summarise where we are at. Less detail, the better, I think, because otherwise, I absolutely understand their concerns. It would be unnatural for them not to have those concerns, but by providing too much detail, inevitably you run the risk of them mistakenly thinking we've got a position across the board, and we don't, you know.
Yeah, and so how would give effect to this recommendation if that's how it stands? As the word's up on the screen now, we'd look for a paper to be prepared to the next scheme subcommittees.
Yeah, and look, I'd actually think about to make the most of time involved in putting that paper together, that it's a general paper that can be shared with a range of different audiences and land users,
definitely,
you know, because so but you probably want to get contribution from Tracy's team and
it would be Tracy's or Karen's team leading that particular piece of work.
And look, there's nothing precluding council from, once Tracy's had a look at this, to maybe massaging that a wee bit.
Is everyone happy with that wording now? Bruce?
I'm just interested in process, so that those recommendations are the recommendations of that subcommittee.
Yeah.
And the place to do the change is when this comes to councillors. We can't now be tinkering with resolutions that have already been through from a subcommittee.
But we can say, hey, the landowners have come to us with this concern. They want some certainty. This is the wording that we think is the most practical way of providing them with a report that gives them the certainty.
Yeah, that's the solution. But the words that are now on the page were agreed to at the subcommittee meeting.
So if I can assist, so the recommendation from the subcommittee stands as it is, so it'll be contained in the minutes. But basically, the subcommittee is asking this committee to make a recommendation to council, and it is up to this committee in terms of what that recommendation is.
Yeah, well, it's confusing because the heading up there is recommendations from Waikato Scheme Subcommittee.
Yeah, actually,
in fact, what we are
that's
discussing
a really good point,
our
Bruce.
recommendation.
Yeah.
I'd just say, noting the recommendation of the Waikato Scheme Subcommittee, the ICM recommends to council.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That clear, Jordan? Just no. Take out that on And replace that with noting the recommendation? Yeah. Just noting?
Yeah.
Yeah. For the, yeah, cool. Spot on. Yeah, good point. Yeah, I'm happy to move that. It doesn't matter. It's most of these council resolutions have that.
Seconder? Oh, sorry.
So what are you seconding? Are you seconding the recommendations from the subcommittee, or are you?
No.
Well, that's what the heading says at the moment.
Yeah. Yeah, we're making our minutes of the recommendation of what they've given to us. Chris, you had another question?
No, that's it.
Okay, cool. So, all in favour? Against? Carried. Thank you. Good discussion.
Yeah,
Right.
so this particular one through Mr. Chair, I'm happy to receive the recommendation. We'll put a item to the next scheme subcommittees. The thrust of it will be that our mission is council's mission. And as you pointed out, Councillor, earlier, there is a process that we go through as a council to develop our strategic direction, which includes our vision and our mission as a council. And so I would be looking to put a paper to the subcommittees to outline what that currently is for council and therefore integrated catchment management, and what the process is for developing that, what the process will be for reviewing that following the next triennial elections next year.
Thank you, Greg. Want to speak? No?
Yeah, this was an interesting one because the question was asked, what is the mission statement of ICM? And no one had an answer. And the answer that did come back from someone upstairs was that council had a mission statement. When it was put in front of me, and it was difficult to catch up, but as chairing and trying to keep everything moving, I thought it was a bit wishy-washy, which a lot of mission statements are to some extent. And I think what the group was looking for is something more refined towards the catchment rather than the wider council activity. So more focused mission statement. And that's what is behind the request here. And whilst the council can have a mission statement, there can also be something more focused, I believe. And that was the theme and thrust of the meeting. Would that be fair enough, Rob?
Yeah, and where the question came from was that when we were going to speak to Morrison and Lowe at the end of the meeting, no one could actually find out what the mission was. And actually the two ladies doing the deep dive into ICM couldn't find where our mission statement was. So that's where that discussion came from. So it wasn't actually, we're doing an assessment on ICM, but we haven't actually got a mission. So that's where it made it a bit. Does that need clarifying? I suppose is a good, and that's where it came from. It doesn't need a mission and doesn't need clarifying what its mission statement is. So there was nothing sinister or anything about it. It was just a question to be raised. Yeah. So thank you.
Can I just clarify though, you Chair, Noel,
Yeah.
that you've seen a mission statement, is that what you're saying?
The council has a mission statement. And I'm not sure if it was actually included in here. I can't remember. I'm not sure that there's some mission statements that you can remember because they're quite strict and whatever.
But if he's seen it, I'd like to see it. That's what the point I'm making.
Oh, Adam, can you share the one that you shared with us that day? Because that's the one I shared with everyone during the meeting. Yeah. 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 Yeah, I think so. Yeah. So if you want to just share that with the committee, that'd be good. No, just during the day sometime is fine. Yep,
We can take that as action.
yep, action, yep, thank you. Ben?
A region that has a healthy environment, vibrant communities and a strong economy. I think we already, long time ago, heard.
Yeah, I mean, just speaking, to clarify what we're actually talking about here, because if there is one, and you've just read it out, thanks, Ben, that's great.
Thank you. So, any more discussion? Can I have a mover? Michael, and a second, and Noel. All in favour? Against? Carried, thank you.
All right.
I'm just going to raise with the Hauraki one, we've covered that already, but can we ensure that they are also considered key stakeholders when it comes to the peat? That was one of the things they wanted to be. Don't know how we reference that. It wasn't in the minutes as such, but it was certainly raised as an issue.
It's an action.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I think the recommendation made is broad enough for that. So good. All right. So, Mr. Chairman, so on to our general items. First up, we've got a request for this committee to endorse our Pathways to the Sea strategy. So I'd like to welcome Michelle White and Brenda Bartels to our table, who will take you through what has been a multi-year journey for council, which started off with recognition that we need to do better in this space in terms of managing safe downstream fish passage through our existing assets. So you'll see from the strategy that there's a comprehensive amount of work that's been done. And so Michelle and Brenda will take you through what's been done, what's been learned, and where we're heading as we go forward in the space. Welcome.
Thank you, Greg. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Kia ora koutou. I do have a presentation if we could get some slides up. Great. So yeah, I just want to introduce Brenda Bartels as well. She has been working in the environmental compliance team. She's a freshwater ecologist and has been heavily involved with Pathways to the Sea. So she's just here to help with any questions that you may have. So just some background to Pathways to the Sea. As Greg said, this has been underway for the past 5 or so years, and we're coming to the end of the project with the development of the strategy. So it's been a partnership project with iwi, industry and other councils. We've had great support from funders, some other regional councils and our iwi partners as well. Slide, please. So a lot has been done over the past 5 years. We've completed 18 milestones. Over 20 technical reports have been produced. We've tested 7 tools, including 3 fish-friendly pumps, and the draft strategy has been completed, which has been reported to you today for adoption. So the tools that we have tested are shown in these pictures. So we've tested trap and transfer, 3 pumps, which is a modified McEwen's pump, Bedford submersible pump, encased Archimedes screw pump, passive acoustic tool, electrical barrier, and a gravity bypass / floodgate. So those are the tools. Some of the key highlights from the program has been raising awareness, building some great relationships internally and externally, and working with iwi, having the first fish-friendly pumps installed in our region. The encased Archimedes screw pump showed 99% fish friendliness. The modified McEwen's pump showed 97% fish friendliness. And that's including passing a really large tuna, which is shown in that picture, a 1.2 metre tuna through the pumps. Through trap and transfer, we trapped approximately 350 tuna at 2 pump stations, and they were transferred to the Waikato River. We know now that tuna successfully use gravity bypass outlets just to move up and down through the catchments. We worked with Waikato Tainui College interns, and they were trained up in trap and transfer and received some micro credentials. And of course, the development of the strategy. So that's one of the key highlights as well. So these are just some of the key highlights shown in pictures. Trap and transfer, working with our iwi partners, doing lots and lots of monitoring and handling eels and measuring them. The bottom left-hand corner shows the process of the modified McEwen's pump from, just a scale model up into the final pump. And over in the other corner is the Archimedes screw pump. So the draft strategy has been going through a review process recently. So it's been reviewed internally and externally. We had one of our partner councils review the strategy, and it's been presented to various groups for feedback. So there's a list of all the groups that we presented to, including the subcommittees and some iwi groups as well, where we've received some really good feedback, really supportive feedback as well. So we've had great support and great feedback throughout that review process. So the strategy itself is divided into 6 sections. So the first section provides some background to the project. It describes why tuna are important, and it provides some context in terms of New Zealand and international perspective. We did a legislation review, so that's included in section 2. The biggest part of the strategy is section 3 that describes all the research and development that was undertaken over the past 5 years. So all that research is summarised in section 3. We developed a prioritisation matrix and decision flow tool, so that's included in sections 4 and 5. And then the final section is implementation, where we provide some recommendations moving forward. So those recommendations are shown here in these last 3 slides. So this is the key part of the strategy and the recommendations. So these are the key recommendations that we have recommended to implement. So the first one is trap and transfer. We recommend implementing this on an annual basis. We recommend installing gravity bypass outlets during pump replacements. Scoping some operational management changes through the behavioural study we did with tuna. We now know that we could tweak some operational management changes. So that's just a recommendation to trial and scope those out at this stage. Installing the in-case Archimedes and installing the modified McEwan's pumps. So those are the 2 pumps that we know that are successful in terms of passing our large freshwater tuna. So the next slide is recommendations to test some other tools. One is the Bedford submersible pump. We have a larger Bedford submersible pump at the Paeroa main drain. So it's recommended to monitor that one for fish friendliness this coming migration season. To scope some other fish friendly floodgate technology, also install and scope out a Bosman Visions fish friendly pump. So that will just provide us with a pump for every scenario. And to investigate upstream passage. We've heard from our iwi partners that upstream passage is very important, as we know as well. At the moment, we only have the floodgates, which provide upstream passage. So, and when the pump is running, we know that that isn't a possible option. So that's another recommendation moving forward, is to do some more investigations into upstream passage.
I'll just go back 1 slide, please. So turning on the 3rd one, keep the floodgates, turn pumps off during dusk over migration season. What would happen during flood events? You'd have some serious reluctance from landowners to have pumps turned off.
Yeah.
So, and they wouldn't normally be running otherwise. Okay? So,
Yeah, this is just a scope out. So if that's not going to be feasible, it's just an example. So this would definitely need to be scoped out with landowners and the operations team.
yes, so, okay. Yeah, there'd be some serious concerns with landowners.
It would definitely be something that would be on a catchment with telemetry. I'd imagine that you could do it without being there to so I'd imagine that a trial for that would have to be on a catchment that's able to be managed off site. Yeah.
We certainly wouldn't be looking to undermine our level of service for the pumps, but this is just about scoping and understanding and seeing how we might do that.
That would probably be a delay as well, just during the peak migration, which is at dusk. So you could turn it on a few hours after that.
I mean, until you know how many hours particular pumps are doing in a 24-hour period, just but premature to say whether it will or won't work for all sites. But yeah. I was just curious. With trap and transfer, in an ideal world, how often would you have to do that?
Yeah, so
I guess it's site specific too, is it?
it is site specific, and I guess ideally you'd want to do it every year at every site.
Oh, so just once a year?
You do it, you target the migration season.
Yeah, right.
Yeah,
Oh,
when,
it is, yeah, okay.
yeah, when you know the tuna are moving downstream and you want to avoid them going through the pumps.
Yeah, okay. And am I correct in my assumption that providing for upstream migration is relatively straightforward in terms of sort of climbing for a thing that nowhere near as complicated as dealing with pumps?
Yeah, yeah, we'd have to, do you know any research about, we'd have to do some research into that. So at the moment there is a gravity bypass outlet, but yeah, we would have to think of some other tool to get them to climb up.
Yeah.
It'll be interesting with our visit on Monday if that siphon pump is able to be used as a fish bridge or not. Oh no, Bruce, you got a question?
Oh, yeah. Oh, thanks for the report, Michelle and Brenda. It's a great report. The costs which were indicated up here and are dealt with in the report, are they in the existing budget or is this a new funding request, Greg?
They will be dealt with through existing budgets and existing planning processes. So, for example, we've got some work happening this year that we're funding through existing operational budgets, where there's more large scale. So pump replacements, we'll be looking to build the strategy into scoping out those capital projects as we go forward. At the moment, they aren't built into our capital budget. So that's a process that we go through in terms of understanding the best options for these sites. I think the thing to reinforce as well is this isn't just about using one tool. We have a prioritisation matrix that enables us to understand what's happening in the catchment and what tool is best. It's also recognised that we're not going in and replacing everything at once, that this is about, I guess, integrating into our normal asset renewal program so we make progress at a sensible rate.
Good, thank you.
I noticed in a paragraph there was Waikato Tainui college funding. Was it just one pump? Is there any other funders out there that would join in funding any pumps?
Yeah, that was, they made a contribution towards the modified McEwen's pump.
Just the one?
Yeah,
Oh,
just the one. Yeah,
Mike,
yeah,
it's
just
a
the
trial
one.
pump. It was the first original, this original one that was manufactured. So we were lucky enough to do the trial and Tainui helped support that. Yeah, there was others, but they haven't actually put that pump into production yet. So it's a trial pump. Yeah. Any other questions?
Okay, I think I've got one more slide. So this is just the final recommendations is to add to our knowledge base. We intend doing some eDNA sampling this coming summer. That's just to add to our knowledge base and improve our prioritisation matrix. To understand our catchments better, we used a sensor fish to go through the modified McEwen's pumps. So we recommend using that through all of our new pumps just to understand the pumps a little bit better. To document fish mortality. So we've been getting some reports from our operational team. So they've been really good at reporting back to us when they see any fish kills at pumps and keeping our information up to date. So we've got the best information that we can use. And the last ones are to continue working with our iwi partners and keep our stakeholders informed on progress moving forward with implementation. Thank you.
One question would be is, I know we got the migrating tuna, but we also got koi, we got pest fish in there as well as catfish and koi carp. As while you're doing those assessments, is any of that taking place of what's the biomass of that in some catchments?
Yeah, so we have caught a lot of catfish through our nets. So we have been noting down how many catfish we've been getting in the nets.
And through you, Mr. Chair, separate to that, biosecurity program has there's a piece of work happening on koi, the pest fish management plan, and that includes understanding biomass information, so we can get a quantification of the issue that we're dealing with.
And the size of it, of each catchment, yeah.
Yeah, so we do undertake surveys and yeah, we do document any fish that we've captured.
Yeah, thank you.
eDNA. I'm doing a big eDNA study as well in all of the catchments, and that will tell us the biomass fish of all fish in the catchment.
Thank you. Oh, you got a question? Oh, that was it. Oh, sorry. Sorry for butting in. Yeah, that's what I mean. It'd be good if it was an electric diverter. Yeah. Pest control. If there's any other, oh,
Yeah,
Oh,
happy to
Stu.
move. That was a really good report. Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Stu's happy to move it. Seconder? No. All in favour? Against? Carried. Thanks. Thank you. Great paper. And we've, you came to all the subcommittee members, meetings, and they all, liked your report and, fully supported the work you've been doing. So it was, really well, that it was supported by the subcommittees as well. So thank you for your report again. Awesome. Oh, sorry.
Ask a silly question. That pump being an experimental pump and other regional councils contributing and other organisations, is that pump, I know it's been moved or about to be moved from Huntly to somewhere else. Is that going to go around the country for others? It's just staying in the Waikato, is it?
So I think the McEwan's pump itself was only funded by Waikato Tainui College, is that correct? Yeah. So the other organisations have funded different parts of the program, but not the modified pump. Yeah.
So they, yeah.
Yes.
So they've had, if we get that right,
The pump is ours.
yeah. So that the other regional councils that help fund the fish, the catching the fish and targeting and all the
Or
scale measures that we've done, not actually in the pump itself.
Correct.
Yeah. Okay. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Yep. Thank you.
Alrighty, so moving on to a review of our land license agreements. So we're a landholder in this region with a number of our assets located on our own land, and obviously not all on our own land, and we'll cover that off later on in another item. But I welcome Lisa Dryce, our asset management team leader, to cover off this for you.
Good morning. The land license contracts last came up in front of this group 2.5 years ago. And at that point, they received a very large rewrite, and both the subcommittees and councillors were involved with that rewrite. This time through, the contract has stayed fairly much the same. There are just 5 points that we wish to make different, which are due to the legal department who have reviewed it, saying, yeah, please make these types of changes to make the contract up to date. So that included items like updating the COVID, the COVID wording, and just again making a few things easier to understand, making them clearer. So the report is to, I guess, notify you that the contracts are coming up for renewal in the Hauraki Plains next year, and in the following year they'll be in the Lower Waikato Plains, the Lower Waikato area, and to say these are the minor modifications that we're making to the contract. So, yes.
Any questions, Ben?
Yeah, I just had a question about the force majeure. I noticed 18.2 talks about it. Force majeure event continues for a period of 3 consecutive months. How does that differ from the COVID-19?
It was making it wider. So the previous wording was saying specifically if there is another COVID-19 event, and this was to make it wider in case there were other types of things that occurred in that area. So we could take more into account.
Right, so it was a draft that had COVID-19. You hadn't preempted it 5 years earlier.
No, no.
Thank you.
Stu?
Oh, no, all good with this. Just curious, generally, as we've had some interesting photos of certain landowners not looking after things properly, how's that tracking these days?
This is, it's always fun, but it's actually tracking better. Yeah, we are about to do the summer inspections. They start next week, Tuesday. So probably by March, we'll be able to say this is exactly how it's tracking in terms of, again, removing old rubbish and wheels and tires and, yeah, the general blackberry and damage that we see out there. We have had less instances over the last 10 months since the last inspection, but the instances we've had two serious ones. One where a gentleman dug into the side of the stop bank, and so there's been an awful lot of remedial work around that came through the Lower Waikato zone managers reports. And then the other where 3 months ago, the district council notified us that a house had been moved onto the scheme land. And so we have been doing the work to, again, we've had it removed. Yeah. So, yeah. So it's, as I say, there's been the odd random one like that occur.
And the really extreme ones, are they people that have been there for a long time or have only recently taken on the lease or something?
One where the gentleman dug into the area, he was new. The one where the house was moved on, he decided to sublease the land to another person. And he has been in arguments with the council for about 15 years, but we are dealing with that through our iwi liaison group because we want to make sure that we're doing what's right for.
Subleasing not permitted without authorization from us, is it?
Yeah. That particular one fits under the co-managed lands area, so we're working with that.
Imagine the applications that.
Yeah.
Thank you.
No, got a
The
question.
timing of the inspections in summer, how do we monitor issues like winter grazing and the likes during winter? So, like the bad situations would show up months later, but, how do we manage winter issues?
Yeah, so we have two scheme land license officers, one for the Waikato, one for the Hauraki Plains, and they are out there every week with the work supervisors. So again, if the community are phoning them, the other land licenses saying, hey, there's something going on next door, they're generally out there responding within a couple of days of being told something. We use the summer period to inspect everything, whether it is on scheme land or it's not on scheme land. And then we use the months post that to then continue to follow up with those people who have had blackberry or gorse or fences damage, or to continue to get that work remediated. And that's a process that we've been really focused on over the last 3 years to get that better every year. So we're getting less and less of a backlog of work.
Thank you. And just, I might be a bit cynical, but you used the word or phrase work supervisor.
Yep.
When I
Scheme
talk
unit
to
lead.
landowners, I think they're called scheme leads or something
Scheme
like
unit
that
lead.
now, but
Yeah.
people don't understand that. And when you say, oh, it's actually the work supervisor, absolute recognition. So I know it's what's in a name, but yeah, it causes confusion, that scheme lead. But anyway, thank you. Appreciate the answer.
Any other questions? I'll go have my turn. I was actually lucky enough 2.5 years ago to be one of the representatives to rewrite the grazing license. When myself and Connell Buchanan had a lot of input into it. So as a landowner of how most probably our look at how if we were leasing a property next door, how that contract would be written. So we tried to get some of that simplified into the contract. So, but definitely it has been made obvious especially in Hauraki, that when we're leasing out land to isolated landowners that do not hold land around there becomes issues really quickly. And I think that's got to be, if we haven't got a landowner that's got a property next to it that they can take stock of, maybe it should be cut and carry or something else until we find a leasee that wants to take hold of it, because there becomes serious issues storing tyres on scheme land and things like that. And then that same landowner then bogged all the stock banks at Cook's Landing and all sorts of things. So it becomes some serious issues, and it was on a state highway and he was doing it in front of everybody. So I take my hat off to you that those things need to be tightened up and those landowners need to be sieved a lot. Oh, sorry, the lessees need to be sieved a lot better. So, thank you.
I'd really endorse what Robbie's just said, It's for all the exact same reasons. It's
Yeah.
it's the same trouble in hill country as well. I
Yeah.
mean, I lease my land out and I make it really clear, if it's raining, get them off, and I
Yeah.
charge a bit less for.
Yeah, and then the same as those are all steep, they're all most probably 30-degree slopes. If there's 50 mils of rain, they need to be gone. They can't be sitting there set, especially because they're break grazing them down the stock bank. It's terrible. And those lessees most probably don't even understand when they take on that contract to the responsibility of what they actually are signing up to either. They think it's just a normal grazing area. Well, it's not. This is scheme asset that is protecting everyone around them. It's not. Anyway, thank you, Noel.
And I don't want to get into operational stuff, but due diligence on how they operate or have previously operated is all that part of the,
That is part, yeah,
Okay.
and again, the zone managers and the land license officers are doing that review to go, are there any that we need to stop because of those ongoing issues?
Yeah.
That we see.
And even that's even farmers themselves on banks that have done multiple years of damage and don't see the issue with it, that we got to do something about that as well. And we're lucky now the cycle trail on the Hauraki Plains is most probably solving that because everyone's riding down it and there's a complaint. So no, thank you. That paper is awesome. I fully endorse it. So need a mover? No. And Stu, all in favour? Against? Carried. Thank you. Cheers for your work, Lisa. It's awesome. Thank you.
Right, we'll now move to our report on our capital portfolio.
Sorry.
Oh, sorry.
Can I welcome? I just welcome John Blackman into the meeting from Acre. He's sitting in the back there. If you actually like to come up and sit around the table if you want, you're quite welcome. Yeah, come up and sit next to Stu if you'd like. There's chairs spare if you want to sit in and listen to the meeting instead of sitting in the background. So thank you for coming. I did ask you to come along last time we went to the Acre meeting, so thanks a lot for turning up. I'll just push the button in front of you. Yep. Yep. Pull the mic down. Yep, that's it.
Yes, I'd like to thank you for coming to.
You pull it to you, John. Pull it, just grab it and pull it up. That's it.
Sorry. I'd just like to thank you for coming to the Acre meeting last month as well.
You're welcome.
So I'm just working to understand the difference between the Environmental Performance Committee and this committee.
Yep.
In terms of responsibilities, particularly for monitoring and reporting. So I'm in a learning curve at the moment.
Well, you're definitely in the right place to learn. So thank you.
Thank you.
All right, I'd like to welcome Julie Beaufort to the table. So Julie is here as our capital portfolio manager. This is something that a structure put in place since August. And so usually the committee would receive an update on our capital program as part of our regular work program updates. From this meeting forward, we'll be providing our papers, a specific paper on our capital program. And the reason for that is that the program has a number of measures that now come with it, particularly Chief Executive's KPI around achievement of that program, and also that its KPI requires the involvement of this committee in terms of overseeing and governing that program. So, yeah, a bit of a more detailed approach today. So welcome, Julie, and Julie will take us through a few highlights in terms of progress and our quarterly forecast for the program.
Thanks, Greg. Kia ora tātou. As Greg said, this is the first report of its type coming to this committee as a capital portfolio report. We're envisaging that we might report to you quarterly on this. Welcome feedback on the report. It's the first time it's been, the information's been presented to you in this way. So any feedback, welcome. I want to cover four key things today as part of the report. One is just an overall update on the status of our capital program. The second are some changes in relation to Q1 that we're proposing. And thirdly, some changes to the CKPI. And lastly, just to highlight the Regional Infrastructure Fund projects that we have received government grant funding. So firstly, just in terms of the overall position of the portfolio, we're sitting at amber in terms of a RAG status for this reporting period, and that's due to some challenges with budget and time in relation to some of our projects. Those project and issues are being managed, and so hence the amber status. You'll see under number 12, the capital portfolio financial summary. We've got a total portfolio there of almost 25 million. That includes the replacement vessel project, which is 2.7 million of that figure. The actuals to the end of the September were around 1.5. So we're only getting started, in terms of delivering that capital work picture. So as you know, as we get into summer, the expenditure will ramp up from there. So secondly was to highlight some proposals we're seeking through the Q1 forecast. We're requesting a rephasing of 2.3 million into next year. That's just relating to some delays we've experienced with a couple of our projects. One is Island Block Road pump station, and there'll be some closure, final bits and pieces and closure activities with one or two other projects as well. So we're seeking to have that moved out into next year. We're also seeking to have $75,000 for the Pangarehu Canal project, and a reduction in the overall budget for that project of 800,000. So we're still working within our overall funding envelope. In fact, we'll have a reduced program for this year. It'll bring it down to about 18 million. So those changes are for you in the table at number 14. Shall I keep going?
There's no question so far. Keep going.
Okay. If you move on to number 15, that relates to the CE-KPI projects. So the KPI requirements are set out under number 15. What the table at number 18 shows is the refinements that we have made over the last month or so in terms of those projects. So as part of the KPI, we're required to come to you for approval for any time extensions or budget increases. So there are three that I'll highlight for you within that table. First one is the pump stations, 6 million. So we're actually reducing the major project component of that to 2.7 million. So no approval required there, just greater clarity as we have more information around our program. But I do want to highlight that Mangatawhiri Compartment 3 project, that has had a reasonably substantive increase following tender. So it's moved from around 620, I think it was 650, up to 920. Now, that is still within the budget envelope that we have, because we've been able to reprioritise some other work. The second one to highlight is under Piakul, shovel ready. So we've got a movement there of 800K identified in the KPI up to 1.7 million. Now that's just carry forward funds from last year to complete two of those projects, one being asset rationalisation and the other being the foreshore stop banks.
And the foreshore stop banks are going to be completed this season.
That's correct.
Yeah.
The third one to highlight is under Waiho. Waiho stop banks. We have a slight increase with the Karakia stop bank project from 2.4 to 2.6. Now, that increase is still, we're actually overall in terms of the project budget, following tender, the cost of that project has decreased. So there's no actual, so actually in terms of the assigned funding envelope for that project, we are within that.
The vessel, we've heard the issues about the river levels and the like. But 30 June 25, that seems to be rather extraordinary time. Is there new issues that we don't know of, or what's going on?
So we have had delay with the delivery of the vessel build. It's taken longer for the shipyard to fit it out than they anticipated. We've also been advised of a potential corrosion issue.
Corrosion?
Yes. Yes.
Already?
Well,
It's not even in the water.
no. Next to the water, I understand, is part of the problem. But look, that's been quantified. We have specialists looking at it. They're looking at it right now, and we're expecting a report by the end of the week as to whether that is a concerning issue or not.
I've got my own opinion on corrosion on a vessel. It's happening before it's in the water. I thought you said, no, corrosion, I thought you said.
Corrosion, yeah, there's
Corrosion.
pitting. There's pitting from weather. Yeah.
Steel's rusting.
Um,
That's what causes steel to
yeah,
pit.
yes.
Greg wants to follow me. Right?
Yeah. Well, just to clarify, so this matter was presented to the Key Project Reference Group, I think earlier in the month. Yeah, so there's maybe a connection we made there. So, and it'll be reported through to the Risk and Assurance Committee. So the vessel project status report itself is provided to those two committees. So I'll make sure there's that strong connection there, Councillor, in that regard.
I think this committee needs to see something as well, because we're the ones that will be using it and overseeing its operation from a governance perspective. That's why I hate these silos in this council. If you're in one committee, you hear about something, but thank you for raising that. Yeah, that's worrying, Greg. Yeah, I'd like to hear more about it and what the solutions are.
Yes, I'll take an action away to provide a briefing to you, Councillor.
Any other questions?
Any other questions in relation to those changes proposed to the CE KPI?
So just to summarise, if I heard it properly, it's just some reprioritisation of a few things and associated budget changes. Well, real shifting within budgets is
Correct.
is it? Yeah.
And quite a few things are coming under budget.
Is there going to be a request to council to amend the API for the chief executive because it's obviously not able to be delivered? No?
So the KPI is outlined earlier in the report. What that KPI requires is that if there are any changes to the projects that inform the achievement of that KPI, that they are brought before this committee for consideration. Yeah.
And is that KPIs just on those three projects?
No, it's on the overall. So there's a list of
Everything.
So there's
Everything
a
on the
table provided on page, where are we? 164 onwards. So this was a table that was presented to the committee in June to get the ball rolling. And so what we have is an amendment to those specific projects that inform the KPI.
Because originally that Karakia stock bag could have been up to like $6 million originally to do that project. So it's come back well under budget. So when the scoping's come, the technical support's come in, then the budget's come completely down. So
That's right. And,
Yeah.
and then there was greater certainty. We had some uncertainty around the borrow material.
Yeah.
And
and
that,
you borrow up material if there's going to be enough to do it or not.
yes.
Yeah.
So it's just a little bit of feedback is because when you read the purpose at number 1, it says seek approval for changes relating to the KPI. But when you go down to executive summary 5, update budget, projects that inform the KPI, which is probably so it's just about getting that wording right. Yeah.
Okay, and lastly, I just wanted to draw your attention to number 19, the Regional Infrastructure Fund projects that are part of the Kānoa's Flood Resilience Program. So we have 6 projects funded through that program. Total overall project costs of around 23 million for us. The grant funding comes through to around 12.5 million. So I'll be reporting back to you on progress with those projects as well. And that's my report. Thank you.
I just wonder, Mr. Chair, if we shouldn't have an additional number 3 in that the committee notes with some concern the corrosion issues raised in relation to the vessel. And I would happily second that if the mover was to agree to that.
My only comment was the word corrosion's been mentioned. That's all we've had. I know I'm not prepared to formally note concern until I know a bit about it, because there'll be one piece of blimmin' metal that's different to all the other bits. I've got no blimmin' idea, but until we know, I just can't see the point of administration involved with a blimmin' resolution. That's where I'm sitting on it.
If it does help, what I can do is, as I said, there has been some communications provided to the key project reference group in terms of the project update. I can take an action to share that with the committee to provide that same information and make sure that that regular update is provided to the committee as well. Yeah, at this stage with this issue, we're in the understanding stage, I suppose, is the main thing in terms of what exactly are we dealing with and what those remedial options are that we have available to us. Pardon me? One of the reasons.
I was just going to suggest the other way of dealing with that would be through CERC, given it's a DEO KPI placement vessel, he could report back through there.
Yeah, all we need is an action. Yes, I think an action's enough. Yeah. You got the action down? I'm sorry. Yeah. So Michael. All in favour? Against? Carried. Thanks, Julie, for your report. And definitely there's a big workload out there and it's good to see that projects are coming in under budget now instead of over budget. So
I have a different message at different times, so just manage expectations.
thank it while you can. Thank you. Are we?
Yeah, I've got it here, but it's.
Is Dave coming down?
All
to
right, I'm
support
feeling
you,
like a week ago. Okay, we'll keep going. If it's all right with you, Mr. Chair.
Well, let's
We'll
go.
pause. Okay. So I'd like to, firstly, just before we continue, I'd just like to acknowledge we've got a number of staff members online as well listening in. So there to listen, but also if there's any questions, we'll be able to direct them to. So you can see, for those in the chambers, you can see who's online. In the meantime, I'd like to welcome Grant, Kerry and Tim to the table to have a chat about looking at actually why we do what we do in terms of our catchment restoration program, the ways that we're monitoring those changes. And I guess drawing out some key messages for yourselves as we, do or often need to make decisions around that program. Welcome, team.
Pull your mic in. Sorry. Just pull it up. Grab it and drag it up. Thank you.
You know me and you know Kerry, but I'd like to introduce Tim. Tim Norris is a scientist in the land and soil team in science and policy, and he'll be running through most of the presentation with Kerry. Some of this information was or has been previously provided to the Environmental Performance Committee, so some of it will be second time around for some of it. Anyway, I'll pass to Kerry to give a bit of an introduction. Thank you.
Kia ora koutou. We'll just bring up the slides. Yep, that's good. Okay, so Tim's going to give the most of the presentation, but I'm just going to provide a little bit of the context to the presentation. Just a reminder, I think everyone on this committee is aware that integrated catchment management incentivises landowners to undertake soil conservation mitigations in priority catchments and reaches, and we get significant co-funding support to do that in priority areas, particularly from the Waikato River Authority and from MPI. As part of our integrated approach to keeping soil on the land and reducing the impacts of sediments and waterways, and also maintaining channel capacity. So it's through those funding policies, part of a whole of catchment approach to a range of different outcomes, including flood protection. And the mix of tools that we have available, our incentivised program is one of the non-regulatory mechanisms that we have for supporting our council to meet our legislative requirements around water quality particularly. And over the years, our priorities for where those incentives are applied have been informed by the best available science at the time. So initially that was Project Watershed back in 2002, and the other Peninsula Project West Coast Zone funding policies. As science improved, we have updated those priorities through zone plans. The council developed the Waikato prioritisation framework that used a lot more GIS and data to inform our priorities, and then that was reflected in the Waikato Waipa River Restoration Strategy. That was now 6 years ago, and we continue to work with SPI to ensure that we are utilising all the information we have to really help target those mitigations into the areas that are going to make the most difference, and also to understand the outcomes, not just the outputs of our work, but the outcomes of our work. And so that is what Tim is going to talk about today. So I'll hand over to Tim.
Thanks, Kerry, and kia ora koutou. So just moving on to the next slide, please. So just to provide a bit of background and following on from what Kerry was saying, we know that soil erosion continues to be a problem across the Waikato region. So according to the New Zealand Land Resource Inventory, and that's been around for a long time now, but there's 1 million hectares of land that has been identified as being erosion prone, 200,000 hectares that has been identified as having severe to extreme erosion potential. So as Kerry mentioned, WRC has actively addressed soil erosion through extensive soil conservation initiatives. And one of the ways that we look to monitor the effectiveness of these initiatives is through our Catchment Environmental Monitoring Program. So if we can just go to the next slide, please. So the Catchment Environmental Monitoring Program focuses on our 4 key priority catchments, and these catchments have been identified as priority catchments through the Waikato Regional Prioritisation Framework, as well as discussions with co-funders, and also through, previous programs and at work within ICM. So SPI and our team in particular have set up this monitoring program within these catchments to really quantify the effectiveness of these soil conservation initiatives. And so we look at measuring a number of different metrics. We look at hill slope erosion, stream bank erosion, riparian vegetation and fencing, sedimentation and surface water, water temperature, and in-stream ecological habitat. And we, as I say, we undertake this monitoring to understand key issues within the catchments, but also to highlight the benefits of soil conservation initiatives that we undertake. So I guess along with the sort of on-the-ground monitoring, we also undertake modelling using a sediment and erosion model called Sediment NZ. And whilst we understand on-the-ground monitoring is most important in terms of quantifying the effectiveness of soil conservation, modelling provides a really useful tool in terms of being able to provide more of a spatial extent of what's happening in terms of erosion, and it really helps fill the gaps and answer some of the questions that perhaps on-the-ground monitoring doesn't allow us to do. So if we just move on to the next slide, please. So the map on the left there is the output from the most recent modelling we undertook with Manaaki Whenua Landcare Research. And as I said, provides a spatial overview of the extent of erosion across the region. You'll notice that highest rates of erosion are along the west coast, parts of the upper Waikato and lower Waikato, although obviously not constrained to these areas. But high erosion in these areas is typically driven by numerous biophysical factors, so land cover, climatic factors, soft rock geology, and a number of other management-related factors. On the right there, I've just put together a graph showing total sediment load or total amount of sediment loss from each of the 8 catchment management zones. And as you'd expect, the West Coast has the highest rate of erosion or loss of sediment, so 808 kilotons per year sediment lost from the West Coast management zone. And then that's followed by the Waipa at 322 kilotons per year, and then the upper Waikato at 304 kilotons per year. Just next slide, please. So one of the main purposes of this recent modelling exercise was to try and quantify the effectiveness or the impact of past soil conservation initiatives. That graph that I've got there is from our regional riparian characteristics survey. So this is a survey that we undertake every 5 years, and it's really to understand the state of riparian margins across the region. So because we can't walk every stretch of waterway across the region and make an assessment, we use a statistical approach where we randomly select between 400 and 450 sites. We will walk a 500-metre segment of waterway at each of these sites, and we make assessments around extent of fencing, stock access, vegetation characteristics, and stream bank erosion. So on these graphs here, and I've just aggregated the data to 3 of our catchment management zones, so the lower Waikato, upper Waikato, and the Waipa. And the key point I wanted to emphasize here is that red line, which is showing an increase in the extent of effective fencing over time. So if we look at the Waipa there as an example, back in 2002, our survey demonstrated that about 20% of our banks were effectively fenced. And then in 2017, that's increased to between 65 and 70%. And our most recent survey in 2022, and the data is not shown here, but shows again an increase in effective fencing. Yeah, sure.
The term effective fencing, does that mean the fence is stock proof or does it include riparian width?
It's looking at stock exclusion.
Yeah. Okay.
So we do measure an additional attribute, which will look at buffer width.
Okay.
So it's an additional attribute. Yep.
But that's not included in this?
Not in this particular metric. No.
Michael?
Yeah, sorry, just a follow on from Stuart, just on fencing. So the upper Waikato region had the highest, or, close to 10%, and probably, with West Coast. And a lot of that was through forestry getting converted into farmlands. To get that consent, wouldn't there be, because it's only been done in the last, 10 to 15 years, wouldn't there been a proactive to say, right, this is what you need to do around the stream, riverways and stuff like that to get the consent to convert from forestry into farmland?
Yeah, back then there was no consent requirements for the conversion of radiata or plantation forestry to farmland. That came in a plan change subsequently.
No.
Yeah.
And the problem with the new water, the fresh water that the government's appealed is that side can do whatever they like again.
Cool. On the map, just to the right there, I've just shown, this is a GIS layer which shows areas where WLC has funded soil conservation initiatives. So just to note that this map shows specific compartments, but also properties as a whole where funding has been allocated. So I guess with all this information, one of the key questions we had is that could we somehow use our sediment and erosion models to quantify the effectiveness of past soil conservation initiatives in terms of mitigating erosion and reducing sediment loads within our streams and rivers. And so the way we did this, was we implemented a number of retrospective scenarios, and these scenarios corresponded with our regional riparian survey years. So we ran the model for 2002, 2007, 2012, and then 2017. And then over time in the modeling framework, we inputted the changes in various soil conservation initiatives, extent of stream bank fenced, And we looked at what impact that might have in terms of reducing erosion and sediment loads. Next slide, please. So this table here, and this is a scary table, I know, but so on the left-hand side there, we've just got the 8 catchment management zones. And then on the left half of the table, we're looking at total erosion corresponding to each of those years that I mentioned before, the 2002 through to 2017. On the right-hand side of the table, we're looking at the percentage change in total erosion compared to 2002 as our baseline. What you will notice there is that for the upper Waikato, we've actually seen an increase in total suspended sediment loads of about 9%. And that's because of the large-scale land use change that we had over that period. So we had a lot of conversion from forestry through to pasture, and that actually offset any improvements we may have seen as a result of any soil conservation initiatives. But for most of the management zones there, you can see that we've seen some quite good decreases or large decreases of sort of up towards 9% for the Waipa. Across the region as a whole, it averages out at about a 4% decrease over that 15-year period.
Sorry, Mr. Chairman, sorry to interrupt you again, but just on that upper Waikato again, because it's my area, and being one of the highest erosion rates, a lot of it has been the ramping of the river too that eats away. Well, I've had farmers ring me and say they've got fish on their land, because when the rivers suddenly, the gates are open at the full capacity that they are, it's flooding their land. So that is a reason for erosion as well, a huge amount of erosion because the river's going at a speed at the fastest that it, can with that amount of water going down it.
Sorry, just a clarification, Sediment isn't utilising, for example, the Waikato River main stem as a measurement of sediment loading, is it?
Yeah, so this is, it's a model. So it is modelled outputs that we're looking at here, but it is calibrated to in-stream suspended sediment concentrations. So we do calibrate that to real data.
Yeah, but it's on random selected sites rather than the main stem of the river, is it not? Or?
So it's based on, we look across the whole river network.
Yeah.
So yeah, we'll look at the Waikato River as a whole, but also all the tributaries that feed into that.
What impact do the dams have on that measure in the upper Waikato? Because once it gets to the first dam, surely the sediment can't go any further.
Yeah, so the model does take into account sediment entrapment and deposition. So what we're looking at here is total sediment loss from that zone as a whole.
So when you say model, is that a desktop or is it actual validated by real data?
It is validated by real data. Yeah. Right, next slide, please. So one of the other questions we had was to look at a series of future erosion mitigation scenarios. So it was to sort of look at our current baseline and then say, what could we do moving forward that could reduce erosion and sediment loading, and how might we use this as a prioritization tool to really target high-risk areas. The way we did this was to use the land use capability layer, and we focused specifically on 6E, 7E, and 8E land. And each of our scenarios looked at mitigating a different proportion of this land. So 20%, 30%, 40%, 50%, and 100% of this land that we defined as being high risk to erosion. The mitigations that we applied were slightly different. So for 6E land, we assumed space planting with either poplars or willows. For 7E or 8E land, we assumed complete afforestation with either exotics or natives. So if we look at the 20% scenario as an example, we would assume 20% of that 6E, 7E, or 8E land was mitigated. So overall, across the region, for our M100 scenario, so that's assuming 100% of 6E, 7E, or 8E land is mitigated, the model demonstrated a 41% reduction in erosion and sediment loads. For the M20 scenario, so that's 20% of 6E, 7E, or 8E land that's mitigated, we modeled a 13% reduction. So that map that you see on the right there is just showing an example of two of our scenarios. So the M20 scenario, as I say, 20% of that erosion prone land, and then the M100, which would be to say that we mitigated all 6E, 7E or 8E land.
Sorry, and
question.
what sort of trees are you using or intending to use on this land? Because historically, I believe it's been poplars, poles and the likes. My experience with poplars, with willows, which were recommended by regional council way back when. They're the ones that are falling over because they're too tall and ripping the riverbanks out. So so why are we using big trees when they get blown over?
Yeah, well, I mean, every time you plant a tree, it needs some maintenance, and I think I know the ones you're talking about, Noel. But wide space poplar pole or willow pole planting on Class 6E land is, a recommended mitigation. It doesn't mean you plant them and leave them forever. They do get to a use by date where you do have to do something with them, either coppicing them or cutting them down and replanting or what.
Ben?
Yeah, just two questions. One, so I see we've spent 55 million so far on this sort of project. Firstly, is MPI continuing its funding, or are they facing cutbacks at the moment?
Yeah, so that was 55 million, I think, over about 20 years. MPI is continuing its funding. We have last year received 4 more years of funding for another around 2.5 million. And the indications that we have from them are that they will be looking to do another round starting next year so that they can follow on that further 4 years immediately as that one comes to an end. So their intent is to keep funding that.
And the second one is M20 gives you 13%. What are we at the moment? Are we at M10 or M?
Sorry, yeah, I should have mentioned that. So at the moment, what we term as our contemporary baseline is current erosion and sediment rates as of 2023. And so these scenarios are relative to the current baseline.
So is there any idea of the cost of going to M20?
So this information is very new, and so since it's been 6 years since we did the restoration strategy, our plan is to, over the next 12 months, to develop a revised catchment management framework, and as part of that, look at the costs regionally of doing the M20, M40, and then using this information to really target where would you apply those to get the best possible outcomes.
Away you go first, Drew.
I was going to say, Ben, too, some of those catchments, I think they've said, for example, 50% of streams in one of the sample catchments are fenced. That means that 50% of the farmers have made an effort. Some have had funding support, some haven't. It means the other 50% haven't made an effort. It doesn't mean they can't afford to make an effort. It just means they want to buy a flasher car than the farmer that's made an effort in many situations, so it's not necessarily a significant cost to the industry as a whole. Change some of these stats. Other stats, yes, it probably will, but it just need to bear that in mind of this conversation zone.
So just on that, is there some kind of carrot and stick model you're thinking of here, or is it all incentive based to get the other 50% of farmers?
Well, the incentives come from rates. So 50 farmers contribute rates to allow one farmer to get an incentive. That's not feasible to do across every farm.
Just through the chair, I think that with these mitigations, they are targeted at the kind of activities that we expect probably wouldn't be regulated. So that's, you wouldn't expect a farmer to be required to afforest Class 7 land, for example. They may need to do some pole planting, but generally all 6E land, they wouldn't be required to pole plant. That would, on top of that, would be regulated activities or farm plan based activities around management of stock on different land classes, managing critical source areas, that kind of thing. So we have really focused on the kind of activities that would be mitigated. We could expect greater achievements if we also included the regulated activities.
And I actually, lucky enough, I got to see this working on action on Monday up at the Coromandel, where Emily had, a landowner had put some land into pines, and they were also dairy grazing on some, and then other areas of 7 and 8 they decided to retire. So there was commercial forestry farm. There was also a dairy grazing unit, and then and they picked it just on the soil types of what was there. And that landowner then had gone and got, even though we'd funded 40% or whatever it was, they'd then gone and got carbon credits for it. So support it 100%, but I'd like to see us that when we're supporting that, we get some of the carbon credits back as well to then invest into doing more. So that's the problem, is we're trying to invest into all these landowners to get this done, but it's all coming off the target, the ratepayer to pay for it all the time. And maybe some of that investment that we're putting into them, we should be sharing a bit of that around as well, because all the other landowners have done that for them as well. So, and that's a conversation I think we need to have at some stage and then the biodiversity credits that might come off that in the future, Bruce was talking about as well. You know, they should be shared with all of us, not just the landowner. I think that's the big key thing, that we can do more in this area without costing us all a lot in the future.
And that's it's a really good point. It's another one of the sort of in-scope areas for our catchment management framework, is because there's all these new opportunities coming, is to look at the role. It's our Nature Plus program, look at the role of biodiversity credits, ETS.
Yeah.
Admittedly, we don't support a lot of exotic afforestation now. Most funders are tending to move away from that because it should be sort of self-encouraging. But definitely with the native revegetation, that will be something that's in scope with building those carbon calculators into our programs now.
And it's, by what I understand, it's a real simple measure, is all land that animals would walk a line on to walk up the hill, that's pretty much should be retired, is what I understand with how Emily was the simple way of explaining it the other day. That makes any sense or not? It did to me as a landowner, that where animals track lines is sort of too steep to farm. Yeah. So no, thank you. Carry on.
Thank you.
Oh no, but they were putting that as land areas to retire. That would be, yeah. Sorry, I might have worded it wrong. Yeah.
Great. So this table here is just showing some of the results from these future mitigation scenarios that I was talking about. And it's a similar structure to those retrospective scenarios I was talking about before. So on the left-hand side there, we have the 8 catchment management zones and the Waikato region as a whole. On the left half of that table there, we're looking at the M20 to the M100 scenario. And then we're looking at total erosion rate corresponding to each of those scenarios. On the right-hand side, and this is what I really want to focus on, we're looking at the proportional percentage decrease in total erosion relative to the 2022 baseline, so relative to current erosion. As you can see, there's across the region, if we were to mitigate 20% of that 60, 70, and 80 land, we'd see a 13% reduction in total erosion. And if we were to deal with 100% of that erodible land, 60, 70, and 80, we could see as much as a 40% reduction, 40.7% reduction in total erosion. Next slide, please. And I should also mention, sorry, just back to that previous slide, is that this is a really useful prioritization tool because it's a spatial data set. So we can actually identify areas in the landscape that we might want to target in terms of having the biggest impact for reducing erosion within a given catchment management zone. So just one final point I wanted to touch on is that we were also interested in looking at the impact of climate change on future erosion. This is a question that a lot of people have, and although there's a lot of error around our estimates because we rely on a number of different climate models, we can still get some sense of what future erosion rates might be under various climate change projections. So the approach we took was to look at various representative concentration pathways. Lower relative concentration pathways, or RCP values, correspond to conservative climate change trajectories. So an RCP 2.6 is like a mitigation pathway. It assumes that greenhouse gas emissions would decrease over time, whereas an RCP value of 8.5 assumes that we continue on the current trajectory of greenhouse gas emissions. So that graph on the right there, I should also mention that we looked at the modeling. The modeling took into account future erosion up until mid-century, and then erosion rates in late century. And you can see some of the numbers over here. So up until mid-century, assuming a mitigation pathway or an RCP 2.6, we would still see a 12 to 24% increase in total erosion up until mid-century and a 7 to 24% increase up until late century. Under the worst case scenario, so this is under the RCP 8.5 scenario, we modeled a 26 to 36% increase in total erosion up until mid-century and a 43 to 52% increase up until late century. Now, the one point I wanted to make here is that though this paints somewhat of a grim picture in terms of the impact of climate change on future erosion, we can see that these numbers are largely offset by potential implementation of soil conservation measures. So if you remember back to the previous slides, we saw decreases of up to sort of 40 to 50% under the M100 scenario. So I think that's a really positive takeaway message, particularly for the Waikato region, is that we have the opportunity to offset any sort of potential impacts of climate change. So just in summary, we've shown, according to our retrospective modelling, that region-wide sediment loads have decreased by around 4% between 2002 and 2017. And as I mentioned, although this is modelled, we hope in the future that we'll be able to back this up with more kind of real-world data, and also that this model is calibrated with measured data. We showed that potential modelled future erosion mitigations produce significant reductions with decreases of up to 41% under the most ambitious scenario. Climate change, as I just mentioned, is expected to exacerbate erosion with increases of up to 12 to 24%, 2040 under the most conservative scenario. But again, we have the opportunity to offset this with implementation of soil conservation initiatives. Just to note that ICM and SPI continue to work together to use this information to better and further develop our prioritisation frameworks in terms of being able to really target those high erosion prone areas for future works. And finally, just to note that we continue on the ground monitoring within our priority catchments to really try and quantify the effectiveness of the work that we are undertaking.
Oh, look, great report, and I love the analytical and modelling approach. I'm trying to understand in the last section on page 175 that I'm understanding it correctly. In number 39, the 41% is the 40.7%. Is that what it is? The results table, 40.7, you've just rounded it to make it 41. Is that what you've done? Well, in your results table, you had an overall catchment of the whole region was a 40.7. Then we now have in the report 41. Are they the same thing?
Yes, that's correct. Yes, that's a difference in rounding.
Okay, and that's good. That's okay. And then taking it to the next bit, the number 40, I was trying to understand that impact. Under the most ambitious scenario, erosion could decrease by 44% to 66. Is that actually a range you're reporting, 44 hyphen to 66, or is it an actual decrease by 44% to 66%? It's just the way it's been reported. I'm just wondering.
Yeah, that's correct. So it's a decrease by 44 to 66%. So there's obviously an error within that estimate. And
Yeah,
so,
or is it a range of decreases? Because you're saying it's a
yeah,
priority catchment,
Yeah.
so it's 44% hyphen to 66. Is that what it is?
it's a range of
Thank you.
decreases. Yep,
Just needed to understand it. Great
absolutely.
report.
Yep, thank you.
Yeah, I just wanted to go back to your climate change graph, because I think if you look at what happened in Gisborne, or if you look at what happens in Spain at the moment, you're getting intense rainfall, and that's going to be a problem that's going to get worse and worse. don't know, it's not this one, it's the other one. Forward, yeah. So your worst case scenarios are 8.5. Is that 2 degrees of warming by 2040?
Yeah, so within each of those scenarios, it takes into account a number of different climate change models, which would then take into account increased storm frequency and severity. And that's why you'll see there's quite a big range in those estimates, because it assumes a number of different scenarios associated with each of those.
And do those take into account your extra funding put in the previous slide where you're talking about your 13% M22? Yeah. No, it's
No, so this
System
considers
baseline.
current conditions. So if we did absolutely nothing and then we had these specific climate change scenarios overlaying that.
Yeah, it points to the importance of trees again, and ways of mitigating this. But in terms of riparian planting, I understand that there's still no carbon credit for riparian planting. Is that correct?
There are minimum width requirements. So 30 metres, you need to have more than 30 metres of riparian planting to qualify under. Or you need to connect your thinner riparian strip to a wider patch somewhere and link it all together. But there are ways of getting around it, but the minimum requirement is typically 30 metres width.
And are we actively encouraging that around the regions where we're doing this work?
I'd like to get Stu to plant 30-metre riparian strips everywhere, but it's a bit tough. You know, most farmers wouldn't go there, not to 30 metres. We're looking typically at narrower margins, 5, 10 metres, sometimes wider, often up to 100 metres, but typically, I suppose you could say 5 to 20.
Because the examples we had from, I think, Emily in presentations recently was that farmers were sometimes willing to give extra margins than would be the minimum required. Yeah.
Absolutely. There's a lot of cost and admin in entry to the emissions trading scheme. Most landowners we deal with won't go there at the moment because they don't have sufficient area in planting or they can't be bothered because of the admin. There are measurement requirements. There's all sorts of admin and costs once you want to enter that scheme.
And just picking up the point that Robbie was making about carbon credits for the council, is there some way we can get engaged in that process?
On our own land, yes.
Currently, are we engaged in that?
Yeah. So Joy, who's you might have, I don't know if you've heard, most of you will have heard from Joy through the Climate Committee around. There is a project to offset the council's carbon emissions through planting or carbon credit acquisition on land that we own.
Scheme land,
yeah. Under the current emissions trading scheme, you can't claim credits on land you don't own.
So that rules us out to some extent.
Unless they change the legislation, yeah.
Thank you.
Just to say one take-home point from this presentation, there's a lot of data and information behind this work. But I suppose as a take-home message, as the committee overseeing this area of our work, you can be confident that we are working with the latest science with Tim and his team and Landcare Research to prioritise where we're spending our money into the best areas. So we are also linked into national groups with other regional councils looking at other tools. And there's a lot going on in that space. Tim didn't talk about the high definition LiDAR down to 5 metres accuracy and how we might build that in. And there's all sorts of technology and innovative changes coming in the next few years.
I'd just like to move.
thank you. Well, just like we've got 1.2 million to do some riparian plantings on drones in the Hauraki Plains and Thames Valley drainage. So all these things help, and once you start the ball rolling, landowners will want to do more, and we'll just have to pick the priority spots where we get the best bang for the buck. That's what it comes down to. So fully endorse the report as well, but Stu can second it.
No, thanks, Tim. It's a really good report. And you present to the WRA the other day. as well. Yeah, no, cool, they mentioned that, yeah, because I said, oh, I've got this cool report I'll share with you guys. Oh, we've already seen it. Yeah, so Ben, in my situation on my farm, yeah, I've just got, I must show you one, there's so many little strips. The admin would be a real nightmare for me to put all my strips in as much as I would like to. One of the things that struck me in here, and you can't help but apply where you live, so I live in the Karakia Catchment, and I forget the figure, 55 or 60% of riparian or streams fenced. It sort of strikes me that that's only one part of mitigation equation, and there's little hotspots, I call them, for Africa. Is there, and just back thinking of what you were just saying, Grant, is there any work in the pipeline to somehow do some surveys of looking at a particular catchment, what percentage of all those hotspots that are also causing a whole bunch of erosion, some in big, really obvious ones versus some really just that sort of death by 1,000 cut stuff? Because I guess where I'm coming from is that when you see that 55, 60% of a particular catchment fenced, you think, oh, that's really good. We're coming over halfway, but of course we're not, because there's a whole bunch of other places that are providing sources of sediment that will be for quite some time, because some of them are quite expensive to address, both in terms of management and timing. Yeah.
And we do, through the catchment environmental monitoring, do an assessment of that through analysis of essentially aerial photography, looking at, is it 500 random samples of 1 hectare within catchments to assess whether they have cover, whether they are actively eroding past erosion. And then that enables us also to be able to target those areas in future. And as Grant mentioned, with the high resolution LiDAR added to these models, it does enable us to go out and have conversations in these areas to really target those hotspots. But that's something that's just becoming available to us.
Yeah. And look, this is just a theory, but I suspect most of the farmers that have been proactive with their riparian fencing tend to be more proactive with their management as well. So you almost the opposite effect with the farmers, the other 45% that haven't done any riparian will have a whole lot more hotspots as well, just because of their managements.
There's a lot of opportunities still.
Yeah. No, it's good, thank you, and really valuable for our prioritisation, Yeah, happy to second,
You, all in favour? Against? You can take a break now.
Don't have a break built in.
You want a break?
We take one. We have a reasonably full, what Q2 coming, so.
Yeah, we have got Alan and them coming at the end. Let's hear it. You want to have 5? Okay, have 5. Thank you.